Right, so this is the Finance Committee, Central Midlands Regional Transit Authority. It's Wednesday, September 11th, 10 a.m., 10:05 or so. Call this meeting to order. Just note that we have a quorum with the presence of myself, Mr. Barnwell on Zoom, Representative Howard by phone. Dr. Morris is absent, and I believe I see advisory member Mr. Green by Zoom. Is that great?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Thanks everybody for being here. I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Second, Mr. Representative Howard. If not up. Okay. Motion by Mr. Barnwell, second by Representative Howard. All in favor? Aye. Take that as a. All right. Agenda is adopted. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? If so, I'll entertain a motion for those.
So move.
Barnwell. I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous. Matters referred from the board. Is there anything that we need to take up from the board? Just the retirement policy, which we'll hear actually later. Right. Later is now. So, item number 5, discussion and or action items. The Optus Bank matter was placed on the agenda at the recommendation of Dr. Morris, and at his request, I'm going to propose that we defer that to the next meeting. We need, I guess I'll take a motion to defer that. I'll make that motion if somebody can second.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that item is deferred to the next meeting. And now a report from an actuary that's been engaged to help us with this question of post-employment benefits. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Andrews.
Well, good morning, everyone. Again, as Mr. Smith alluded, we have hired an actuarial to show us what post-employment benefits would look like. We have on the line John Mitchell and Matthew Yance, who will go over what that would look like for those employees who are lucky enough to qualify for it and what it would look like on our books. So I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Okay, so my name is Matthew Yans, and I work with John Mitchell. And as Ms. Andrews noted, she asked us to prepare a memo to kind of give you at least a starting point for the conversation. So what some potential plan options and plan designs may look like on your financial statements. So excuse me, I think a memo may have been distributed.
Yes, we have that.
Okay, so I'll just kind of briefly walk through the memo, and then on page 2, it gets to the numbers, and I'll go through those as well. So the first thing we looked at is just 3 potential plan designs. And I just want to, before we get into the plan designs, I just want to note that, I mean, there are really a lot of different ways you can design these plans. These are just 3 starting points. These aren't necessarily recommendations. So there are many options that you can explore. This is really just to kind of start a conversation and for discussion, and just to kind of give you an idea of what these may look like. So option number 1, so we kind of started with this one because this is really going to be the most expensive option. So this is where Comet would pay 100% of the employer portion of the premium and 100% of the employee portion of the premium for the lifetime of the retiree. So this is really as expensive as it can get. And so that's starting with option number 1. And then option number 2, so this was an option that Miss Andrews kind of outlined. This kind of has a breakpoint based on PIBA date of hire. And so if you're hired, so if your PIBA date of hire is prior to May 2nd, 2008, Comet would pay 100% of the employer premium and 50% of the employee premium for the lifetime of the retiree. If you're hired after that date, Comet would only pay 100% of the employer premium. So that's kind of option number 2, and that's kind of I guess you could kind of sort of think of that as like a middle ground approach. And then option number 3, this is based on the plan provisions for the city of Forest Acres. So these plan provisions also have a breakpoint based on date of hire. So if you're hired prior to May 1st, 2006, Comet would pay 100% of the employer portion. If you're hired after that, Comet wouldn't pay anything. So basically, retirees would just have access to the group plan. And I just want to point out under option number 3, there's only one current active employee that was hired prior to May 1st, 2006. So this basically option number 3, you can kind of think about that as like the minimum benefit that you can give, because there's really only one active and one retiree that would get any kind of premium subsidy. Everybody else would just be access only, basically. And for all 3 of these options, we assume that Comet wouldn't pay anything for spouse coverage. So if that changed, then obviously that would increase the liability. The census data that we used, this was provided by Miss Andrews, and it includes 17 actives and 1 retiree. So we did what's called a closed group projection. So basically what that means is we don't make any assumptions about future hires. We just project the group as it currently is projected out. And then for the assumptions, so the main one is the discount rate. So we use the discount rate. So let me back up for just 1 second. So if Comet had to make accounting disclosures as of June 30, 2024, the discount rate they would have to use is 3.97. And that's mandated by an accounting statement, GASB number 75. So we use that discount rate, but next year, as of June 30, 2025, that discount rate will change. So next year, when you put this on your books, it'll be at a different discount rate, but we just don't know what that is yet. And then just for the other key demographic assumptions, we look to the state health plan, PIBA. They put out an accounting disclosure report, and we use the same assumptions that they do for all this stuff. And so then I'll kind of get to the actual numbers. What it looks like. So on page 2, we kind of put together a 10-year projection of what these options would look like. So for option number 1, so again, that's kind of the most expensive option. That is Comet paying 100% of the employer and employee premium for the lifetime of the retiree. And so the initial liability would be $868,000 roughly. And it would go up from there. And so I guess probably the two ones that would have the most impact is the projected OPEB expense. So that's what would go on the income statement item. And so that represents expensing the initial liability immediately, and then kind of the ongoing income statement impact going forward. And then the line right below that where it says projected benefit payments. So that is the projected cash payments that Comet would be making to retirees based on the plan design and also the assumptions. And then option number 2, kind of the same sort of projection. The liability for number 2 is lower than number 1 because it's not quite as, Comet doesn't pay everything on option number 2. So that reduces the liability a little bit. And you can see that over time, also the cash outflow is a little bit lower over time. And then same for option number 3. Option number 3 is really, you can kind of see that the liability is much lower because it's essentially only access only for just 2 people. I'm sorry, it's essentially access only except for 2 people. There's really only 2 people that would get a medical subsidy under that option. And so the liability and also the cash outflows are much lower under that scenario.
And so I'll jump in. I think as Matthew pointed out, I would certainly view this as just a framework. you can change any of the parameters as far as, service that's required in order to get a benefit subsidy, and that will affect the cost too. So we just kind of wanted to give you kind of a range of potential outcomes, but certainly if you wanted to tweak the plan design, you could certainly do that, and it would have an impact on the cost.
Yeah. So we'll kind of pause here and kind of did a lot of talking and see if there are any questions or anything we need to explain a little further.
Thank you both. I think I want to just make a few comments before I open it to questions from committee members. There's been kind of discussion about this for a while. I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe even longer. And I had asked Roz to engage an actuary to give us a sense for what this would really cost us. I think that this is just a piece of the puzzle if we were to go this route, because I think there's legal implications. We want to craft a policy that was thoroughly vetted and anticipated all sorts of eventual outcomes. And I say that from experience, because things come up that you don't anticipate when you're just thinking about a program like this. So you have to put really, really clear rules around it. But I think the main thing that I take away from their analysis is that, out the gate, just to do something like option 1 or option 2, you're talking about a first year expense of $800,000, and then a liability that's same for that first year, and then that liability increases in time. So I think what I was encouraging staff to do was give us a real sense for what's the true cost of providing post-employment benefits, and I think this does do that. I will note too that third option, the City of Forest Acres option, reflects the fact that the city used to have an OPEB program, but is phasing it out because it is so expensive. Particularly, this is a population here. With the City of Forest Acres has 75 or so employees, so those liability numbers get a lot bigger than this. But so those are just kind of comments to frame the discussion. So now I think I'd like to hear from committee members. If you've had a chance to review this memo, these options, if you've got any thoughts or questions for the actuaries, I'll open the floor.
I don't have any additional questions at the moment. I think this will be some deeper conversation based on, to your point, Andrew, about a policy that may reflect this, and that may also allow us to have some guidance according to budget as to some final decisions.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Howard or Mr. Green, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What do you need?
Just thoughts or comments on the actuary's report for post-employment benefits?
Okay, no, I'm good. I don't have any questions.
Okay. I guess I have a question for the actuaries. A couple questions. One, you said that you did it on a closed basis. Does the projection though, so no new employees are coming in, but you are presuming that the size of our staff stays the same, correct? I mean,
Well,
maybe the question I'm asking is, are we running the risk of severely underestimating this liability in, say, 2035 because we're not assuming new entrants?
Well, to address your first question, so a closed group projection doesn't assume any new hires. So just for the purpose of this projection, we would not assume, it's basically just projecting the current population forward. And to address the second part, new hires, I think the way we approached it is to even be eligible for a benefit, employees have to be eligible for retirement from SCRS and have, a 10 or 15 years of service with Comet. And so, the initial liability of a new hire is very low. I mean, essentially zero, because it takes them several years before they would even be eligible. They have to work quite a while before they would even be eligible to receive a benefit. And so, and I think you're kind of getting at something else is the reason we only showed a 10-year projection is that once you get out 20, 30 years, there's a lot of uncertainty with medical cost. I don't think anybody has any idea what medical costs will be in 20 years, 30 years. I mean, we certainly don't. So when it comes to projecting out medical costs, we typically like to look about 10 years out. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what the liability will be in 10 years. But I mean, you do bring up a good point that there's a lot of, once you start getting 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, it's really hard to predict what medical costs will be at that point in time. So I guess to give you a short answer, I think the numbers as of 6/30, as of 2035 that we've shown in our projection are at least a reasonable estimate because new hires are going to have a very low liability. But once you get past that point, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty after that.
Right. Okay. And then my other question is, do you know of any other public entities that are adding these types of benefits? My sense is that everybody's kind of going the other way and trying to phase them out.
We have had a few cities that have had closed plans that have explored opening them up. So like, for instance, they may have closed their plan to new hires after 2010, but they've explored the cost of opening them back up. So I would say that, within the last 2 or 3 years, we've had more people approach us about opening a plan than we had probably in the last 10 or 15 years prior to that. I think a lot of it is due to, trying to be competitive in the marketplace.
Right.
That's kind of the sense that we've gotten that, they want to open the plans back up to, be able to recruit employees. But I will say we have had more approach us recently in the last 2 to 3 years about adding OPEB than subtracting.
Okay. That's interesting. I think I've kind of sensed the same thing about defined benefit plans, the retirement side too, that there's kind of a shift pendulum swing back a little bit towards that. But okay, so that's really helpful. I think for us as a committee and staff, I think next steps would be to try to see what other, I'd like to know what the other transit authorities in South Carolina are doing, whether they still have open OPEB plans. And then, if we want to proceed with further exploration, we'd have to get legal, I think, involved and start thinking about what implications there might be from that side, how to craft, guardrails around the policy. I think this gives us a good picture of what the numbers are, but then we have to deal with questions of equity and making sure the provisions in place are, I think, fair. I don't think implementing Forest Acres plan would be fair because that's one employee who would benefit. And I think that
Super fair to me.
So I would worry about that, but I also, the other side of me says I think option 1 and 2 are maybe too rich, because I think there is some cost sharing that needs to happen if there's a post-employment benefit. So those are just my very preliminary thoughts on now, but what I've learned, I've done some work for a national church body that has a defined benefit plan. And you've got to be very, very careful in how you frame these sorts of things for a number of reasons, equity, but also not setting yourself up for a problem in 20 or 30 years. So I think this is a really good first step in making sure that we're not, setting ourselves up for problems down the road. Any other questions for staff or the actuaries, committee members?
Hey, Andy, while you speak of that, how would we typically fund this if, we only might have funding for 5 more years at the worst case scenario, and I guess maybe 20 years or 25 years at the best case scenario.
Yep.
So would we stick some money out or what?
Yeah, so you can fund the liability. I don't know what our options to do it would be. I don't know if we can participate in Orbit, which is a state level. I think that might just be municipalities, but you can pre-fund it. So that would be one way to deal with the uncertainty of our future revenue streams. But the other, would be, so I think your point is a good one, that there's long-term risk associated with these types of benefits, and we just are kind of at a point where maybe we should know some things first before we take decisions that have a long-term impact. So I think that's a good observation. But I think if you got that memo, you can see that, we would absorb the liability under each of these options the first year, which would be, in this scenario, fiscal 25. But there would be an ongoing expense associated with it and a sort of adjustment of the liability through time.
Yeah, just to jump in real quick. So, under the accounting statement, basically you have kind of 2 options to fund the liability. One that you've talked about, pre-funding, setting money aside in a dedicated trust, which, that also has its own complications, but you can also, what it's called pay as you go. Basically, you don't formally fund it in a trust, and then you just pay the benefit payments each year as they come due. And also just wanted to make one more point, the projected OPEB expense. So that is an accounting expense. That's what would show up on the income statement. So the actual cash that ComEd would have to pay for retiree benefits is that projected benefit payments line. So, for instance, under option 1 in the second year, ComEd wouldn't have to pay $102,000 of cash. That would just be the accounting expense. The actual cash outflow for ComEd would be, roughly $8,200.
Right. And that expense, correct me if that expense then is to true up the liability?
Yeah, it's to true. Yes, that's correct. Because
basically the situation, that you would have is, you've got very few current retirees who are receiving the benefit. And so that's kind of your benefit payments and your cash outlay. And you can think of the expense, predominantly it's attributable to, your active employees who are accruing the benefits for accounting purposes. And so, it just like a defined benefit pension, the active employees, accrue a piece of their benefit every year for accounting purposes. And so that's really kind of what's happening with the expense there.
Right.
Yeah, as they move toward retirement.
Okay.
And I guess one final thought before we finish up, there are some plan design options that can limit future costs from, going crazy. And I guess if you get further along in conversations, we'd certainly be more than happy to, to help, at least give our input. Just for instance, PIBA offers post 65 coverage, but it's at the same premium as pre 65 coverage. So you can encourage your employees to get a Medicare supplement, which is typically cheaper post 65 than what PIBA's coverage is. That's one option. You can, OPEB benefits don't necessarily have to be tied to a premium. You can just give flat dollar benefits. So for instance, you could say, well, we're going to give our retirees $200 a month to use towards medical expenses. So, one idea, if you're really, one idea to really keep in mind, the vast majority of your future costs, the increases are due to medical inflation. So if you can disconnect what you're paying for retiree medical benefits, if you can disconnect that from medical inflation, you can really have a lot more control over what the liability is in the future.
Right. Okay.
Right. And the other thing, I mean, in most cases, if you look at the ACVRs, you could go out, which is public information, as typically for other entities, it'll give a brief summary of the plan design that's in place. So, I mean, that might be helpful if you, kind of look at some of your competitors and that sort of thing, to take a look at their ACVRs and get a sense for, what their plan designs are. And, we have our model set up. So if you, as you're working through this process, we're certainly happy to, kind of put a number with an idea, if you will, if you have a plan design that you want to, take a look at, and we can give you a sense as to what the costs associated with that would be.
Okay. All right. Unless there are other questions or comments, I will thank you for your time today. It's really helpful framing of our ongoing discussion.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just let us know, and we're happy to continue whenever you're ready.
Okay.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So, I mean, as I kind of noted, I think some more comparative analysis of other entities would be helpful at this point, unless I hear something from other committee members about particular motion or anything. I think we'll just continue to have the discussion. Okay. All right. So the next item, number 6, monthly financial report from Ms. Andrews.
Hello again. So I'd like to call your attention to page 15. Page 15 of your packet highlights our monthly in review for the month of July. Just to note that we are in a new fiscal year, and for Roosevelt's sake, we are in a new fiscal year, and we kind of run these 2 months behind. That gives us time to make sure all expenses and everything have been recorded. So July represents 8% of our fiscal year completed. All right. Sorry, I see the word revised up there, but our annual budget for this fiscal year is $43.8 million. Our net income for the month is $525,000. Of course, our actual year-to-date will be the same since we are starting out the period in July. Revenue for the period is almost $3.1 million. It represents 7% of our annual budget. Total expenses are roughly $2.77 million, and it represents 6% of our annual budget. Paid to date to the contract operator since inception of the contract in July 2020, it's almost $78 million. The next section outlines vendors we paid in those categories: professional contract services, marketing, and security. Those with an asterisk, the invoices for those are also included. So I won't go over them. Going down the next, past donations, for the fiscal year 2025, we didn't do any, donations for that period. Next bullet is our penny revenue. So we did get it, we billed them, in July, but we didn't receive the payment until August. So that bill was 7.2 million. So that gives us a remaining balance of 24% of the penny funds. And again, I just have down there that those funds are expected to be depleted December 2026. And that is the end of my report. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Ross, any questions for Ross?
Roz, I did have one question, and I started looking at the expenses for this period in comparison to where we were last year, as well as the revenue. I think we're up a little bit on revenue as well as expenses. But the question I had also may tie into Michelle a little bit, and that was dealing with there were several expenses that we had not received, I believe, or expended to receive the grant funds that we will be getting back for those. Is that still the case where we have a number of things pending that we still have to expense to receive the grant funds back?
So this will probably be a twofold, but as far as the expenses go, we always record the expenses. And sometimes the receiving of the revenue has to do with the timing of the grant award.
Okay.
So we may get pre-award authority, so, we go ahead and spend, and then when they, open the gate and tell Michelle that she can now, apply for reimbursement, she do so.
Understood.
Does that answer completely? You need insight from Michelle?
I think we'll perhaps go a little bit deeper a little bit later, but that's fine. I kind of understand the flow of where we're going with it, so no problem.
Yeah, so we always expend them. The expenses will always be captured. We don't not record any, so they will always be there. They're getting the reimbursement, because we have to spend to get it. Getting the reimbursement is a timing of when they let her apply for the grant reimbursement.
Gotcha. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Hey, Roz. Oh, yes. Roz, I just had another question or two about so the penny tax. We will expend the penny tax in, did you say in 2026? Is that correct?
Yes, that was, I guess, grapevine news I heard when Overture, when they were talking, as far as Richland County, they are expecting the current penny to be depleted in December 2026.
Okay. So I'm just saying worst case scenario, then we would have 2026 and we would have to do something then to keep on funding past that.
Correct.
And then when is the RapDev contract up?
The initial term, it's a 5-year term, so 2025 will be up, but they have the option for additional years.
They have the option to renew, or we have the
Well,
option to renew?
the contract has the option of additional years.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to check on. So they'll basically be up next year then.
Yes.
Okay. And do they have a price increase built into their contract?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'll note that our city council received a report from Richland County last night where they confirmed that general timeline, December 2026. And if I understood him correctly, and this is less important, I guess, for the comment than it is for the county and the capital projects, but the way the referendum is structured, the new penny would not go into effect until the old one has been exhausted. So just a kind of helpful tidbit as we think about that timeline. Quick question I had on speaking of RapDev and the expense. I mean, I know it's 1 month into the year, but I do note that both fixed route and part are less than we budgeted. Is that a function of less service than anticipated, or is it just curious as to why there's that variance there? So I'm looking at page 18.
So, yeah, in a nutshell, they do bill us that flat monthly rate, and then the variable rate is based off the number of hours we do. So when we budgeted, I did it at the max hours they could possibly go, and then,
Okay.
yeah, they bill us monthly.
Conservative budgeting. Okay.
Yes. Cause I would never know month to month what they're gonna run. I know what they should run.
Mr. Chairman, to add to Mr. Green's question, if you on 26, that does end what our current funding for the penny. However, if you look at the bottom of page 16, emergency reserve and operating reserve, there are funds there that are carried over an additional 2 years. So 26 is our drop deadline for receiving additional funds from the current penny. However, we do have funds in reserve.
Yep.
Carried over.
State that once again, Mr. Pearl, you said 2 years, is that correct?
No, correct.
Okay.
I say
Yeah, so we have money in in our reserve. Remember the LGIP funds we created? Those
Right,
were
right.
to carry us beyond when the penny ended until we can get a new or plan B going. So if you're looking at what we have now, which is about 36 million, that should cover us roughly about a year and a half, no more than 2 years.
Okay.
Yes, at the current running level.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Director Pearl.
Sir.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, thank you. Well, next item is DBE update on Butterflies.
Good morning. The DDE reports are found on pages 43 to 46 on the finance packet. On page 43 through 44, just a quick snapshot of our vendors with the DBE goal, the comment, and this is as of July 31st. We had expended approximately $84.6 million with vendors with DBE goals, and of this amount, DBEs received approximately 21 million, which equates to 24.9%. And on pages 45 to 46, is relevant to our contractor RATP Dale and their DBE utilization. And this goes back to the start of the contract, July 1st, 2020. And as of July 31st, the DBE cumulative goal was at 21.7%, which is approximately $16.8 million that they had to spend with DBE firms. This ends the DBE update unless there are questions.
Questions of Prince about DBE performance through July? Okay. Hearing none, item number 7, comments, announcements, motions, anything from the committee? And hearing none there are no legal contractual personnel matters that require us to go to executive session. So given that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Do I hear a second? Will second. So we are adjourned. Thank you.